The Moral Argument by Immanuel Kant. It is an a posteriori argument. The argument starts from our experience of morality and life, basically. Kant examined our people's lives and he came to a conclusion, which is this moral argument. He did not do an argument to prove God's existence. So, for example, Saint Anselm, he had the ontological argument to prove God's existence. No, Immanuel Kant did this argument to say that it was reasonable to postulate on God's existence. It makes sense to believe in God's existence, and if we want to make final sense of reality, then we have to believe in God, or reality doesn't make sense. Before we get to the argument, you need to understand it's based on three assumptions, and if you want to understand the argument, you have to believe in those three assumptions before you can try and understand it. The three assumptions are: firstly, we are free to choose between right and wrong. The second assumption is that a person who lives dutifully will be rewarded by God. So you can see the problems arising. People don't believe in God. People say, how can you prove that? People say, do we really choose right and wrong? There's laws. Anyway, the third assumption is that there is an afterlife to make this possible. Many scientists, they don't believe in an afterlife. Well, to understand the argument, you have to believe in these three assumptions. So here's how it goes. People who are morally correct and they act in a moral way, they are not always happy. They can be quite unhappy at times because life treats them badly. They're not getting treated fairly, yet they're acting morally, and someone who's not acting morally might be getting at a much higher place. And so Kant said, but these people, they still continue to act morally. Why do they still continue to act morally? Well, he says there is something, right? There is this concept of duty. These moral people feel they have a duty to achieve the highest good, which he calls the summum bonum. The summum bonum is like a reward, okay, that you will get in the next world, in your afterlife. And he said that these people continue to act morally in a moral way because they believe they have a duty to achieve this. And so, how do they know how to act morally? Well, our sense of reason tells us which laws should be obeyed, and it's quite easy to suss out which laws should be obeyed, because laws which can be universalized, they should be obeyed. For example, if I was making a decision whether to steal my friend's phone or not, I would know that is unmoral, because I would think that if the whole of society started stealing phones, this would be unhealthy for society. Therefore, it's an unmoral decision. If it was making society work at optimum level, I would think of it as a moral decision. This is how people know to act in a moral way. And he called these things categorical imperatives. They are non-negotiable absolute truths which someone is required when they're fulfilling duty. This is absolute command they must do. Whereas there are hypothetical imperatives which is like, you will behave good so you can go to heaven. Kant said, no, these are just absolute commands somebody follows when they are fulfilling their duty to reach summum bonum. He said that there must be a reward for this moral behavior which is making them act in this way. This is probably going to be in the next world, which is going to be the highest good, i.e. summum bonum. He said, therefore, we can conclude that it's reasonable to believe God exists, because if God didn't exist, who is going to promise us of summum bonum if there is no God and then there's no summum bonum? Why are people continuing to act morally when life treats them bad? Sigmund Freud, a former psychologist, he had many criticisms to do with this argument. He believed our sense of duty and moral awareness came from socialization, which is basically the adaptation of behavioral patterns based on the culture and our surroundings. So he believed that if all around us people were acting a certain way and we were seeing that something is right everywhere, we would start acting in that way. Before you get any further, Sigmund Freud, he studied the human psyche, this human mind, and he said there are three parts to the human mind. The first part is the ID. Now, the ID is the primitive animal instincts that humans have. It is what we need for survival. This part of the brain wants hunger, greed, lust. It's whatever the animal needs are. And then on the other side of the brain, you have the ego, which is a perception of the external world. It takes in reality. This is where it looks at socialization and it says, these things are correct. Therefore, that's the decision we should take. Whereas the animal instincts will say, I need to survive, I need food, therefore I'm going to kill that deer. That is the decision it takes. Now, the super ego, it comes in between. Now, what happens is whenever we choose one of these decisions, we either choose from the ego, we choose from there, or a combination, our super ego will evaluate our decision. Our super ego has two parts, the ego ideal and the conscious. The ego ideal, where if we do a good action, they will praise us that this is good. They'll make us feel good. So next time we know to do a similar decision. Our conscience, on the other hand, if we do something bad, it'll make us feel guilty, and this will deter us from doing the same bad sin or whatever it is again. So he said, that's why he said, so our decisions actually are just a product of our moral awareness is just a product of feedback we get from our super ego, our unconscious mind. They're not from any divine source, because he said if they were from a divine source, then there would be moral consensus. He said everybody would agree on the same morality. He said, but evidently this is not true. If we look at our moral issues, such as for example, let's say euthanasia. Some people say it's unmoral euthanasia, you're killing somebody, taking their life, it's murder, it's incorrect. Other people say no, euthanasia is moral because it's the most loving thing to do. You're curing you're looking after your loved one, you're taking away the pain. It's a moral thing to do. And there are these conflicts. And he said if there was a divine origin, there would be one set moral code which is enforced by God, and then everybody would follow them. These conflicts wouldn't occur. Evidently, they do. And so, just building up on that criticism, then, as we said, it would be consistent. There would be a consensus. But he said this also doesn't explain reality, because, for example, with the Yorkshire Ripper who assaulted like 13 women, he claimed to follow voices in his head. And from this, we can imply that our super ego, which produces these feedbacks, isn't objective. And when we make decisions, it isn't objective. We don't actually think is this universally correct. We don't do that. It's actually more subjective. It's more based on maybe a person's upbringing, the socialization, all these factors. And he said, therefore, moral awareness is not of any divine origin, it is of a human origin.